Hello and welcome to the lesson which is on algebra terminology. So make sure you've got your unit booklet with you and that you've turned to the first page of notes which is on algebra terminology and you can fill them in. Make sure you're also listening to the audio too, because sometimes there's a few extra things that I might not have written down but you might pick up and want to make a little note of it yourself. Okay, so as we said, algebra has a whole vocabulary of its own. So here are some notes to help you get started. You might remember some of this terminology because it was probably covered a little bit in Year 7, possibly a little bit in Year 8, but definitely in Year 7, I'd say. We need to kind of do a refresher because it's kind of the base. Like we'll be using these terms a lot throughout this whole unit on algebra. So below we've kind of got like, let's see. What have I got here? Okay, it doesn't seem to want to move. There you go. So below notice I've got 5x squared minus 9x plus 36 equals 7m plus 82. So let's see, what are all these things? So first of all, this whole thing in blue, see in blue? So surrounded here in blue is what is called an expression. Similarly, over here, this is another expression. So an expression is a collection of terms. If it's an expression, there's no equal sign, so the blue part is just the expression, whereas the entire thing is instead an equation. An equation sign has an equal sign. So one thing you could sort of say to identify what an expression is, it's a collection of terms, no equal sign. In an expression, in an equation, there is an equal sign. Another way you could say it is it's a collection of terms separated by plus and minus signs. So it's a collection of terms separated by plus and minus signs. If there's more than one term in the expression, then they'll be separated by pluses and minuses. It's possible, like for example, 52x squared could just be the whole expression, but it turns out the whole expression on this part is 52x squared minus 9x plus 36. So overall, this part in blue is called an expression. Over the whole thing overall, this entire thing overall, that's why it's in a black box. Overall, this entire thing is an equation. So the equation, it has to have an equal sign, but also on top of that, you've got to have terms either side. There must at least be some terms present. Like you can't just have this here and an equal sign and nothing there. You've got to have an equal sign and there must be terms present on the left and the right-hand side. Another example is the letters. What do we call the letters in algebra? We don't call them letters, we call them variables. So another name for a variable is a pronumeral. You might have heard us use the word pronumeral instead, but generally in our course we tend to use the word variable. They represent values that change, they vary. So m is an amount that varies. Same with x. X is an amount that varies. This x squared, x, this another x, is an amount that varies. So they're variables. So a variable is a letter. It represents a quantity that changes. You could also add that in if you want. So if you, again, just pause and go back if you need to go back and re-listen to any of this. So a letter, it's a variable is a letter, and represents a quantity that changes, that varies. That's what a variable is. Whereas if there is a term and there's no variable associated with it, we call that a constant term. Let's go back to here, a term overall. What is a term to begin with? So lots of ways you can define what a term is. These three green things are terms. Similarly, 7m is a term and 82 is a term. They're all terms. 52x squared is a term, 9x is a term, 36 is a term, 7m is a term, and 82 is a term. So for example, a little example of a term, terms are separated by plus and minus signs. So what we've got here is, for example, there are three terms in the above expression, like the blue expression on the left-hand side contains three terms. Try to think how many terms are in this part of the equation, in the expression on the right-hand side. How many terms are here? There are two terms, because terms are separated by addition and subtraction signs. So the way I define it, for example, there are three terms in the above expression meaning the one in blue, but 5 terms in the whole equation because we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 terms in the whole equation. So 9, in this one, 9 and x, they're not separate terms, but 9x overall is a term. And that term is made up of a variable and this thing, which is called a coefficient. So going back to what is a coefficient, that's a nice long word. Coefficient, it's a little simple way of identifying it is you could say it's a number in front of the variable. That's a simple way in terms of identifying it. That's how some students might think of it. Another way you could word it is you could say a coefficient is the amount that the variable is multiplied by. So a coefficient must go with a variable. For example, 82 is not a coefficient because it's not multiplied by any variable. But if it's a number, just a straight up number that's been multiplied by a variable, it's got a special name and it's called a coefficient. And remember, we tend to write the coefficient before the variable is what we tend to do. Like we don't write M7, we write 7M just because that's the way the algebra rules were set when it was kind of being formulated, algebra. So coefficient, it's a number that's being multiplied by the variable. If you want, you can say in front of the variable, but more mathy, it's a number that has been multiplied by the variable. Okay, that's called the coefficient. So what's the coefficient of the x squared term here? That's right, it's 52. Now, interestingly, what's the coefficient of this term here? And you might by accident think it's 9, but notice it's negative 9. The negative sign's important. So the coefficient of the x term is negative 9. What's the coefficient of the m term? It's positive 7, so you could just write 7. A constant term, an interesting one, there's a constant term here and there's a constant term here. What do you notice that's special about these constant terms as opposed to these kind of regular terms? A constant term is a special kind of term. It's a term that is just a number. There are no letters or variables, so it's a number. So a constant term is one that does not contain a variable. This is not a coefficient. Remember, a coefficient has to be multiplied by a variable. This is instead called a constant term. So you couldn't call 82 or 36 coefficients. Instead, you'd have to call them constant terms, and so on. If you've got any questions as well, just feel free to write them on the side of your booklet. Write a little bit of question time. You've probably got a bit of space, so you can always fit in a few little questions, thoughts, concerns, and you can always email me or ask me when I come back to class. Okay, so at this point now, what you're going to do is, after I finish waffling on, oops, I don't want you to show you the answers. So after I finish waffling on, you're going to pause this and you're going to watch Algebra for Dummies video. Because you'll notice on Firefly, I've got 2 videos listed. There's this video and then there's a video for this page. So don't be offended by the title. And then what you're asked to do is match the descriptions here, like the descriptions here, with the examples on the side. Okay, so now I would say pause this. So pause this video now and then go back to Firefly and watch the Algebra for Dummies video. That's the video below this one on Firefly. So pause now. Okay, good. So hopefully you've paused and you've gone and watched the other video now and you've tried to fill in the sheet. So make sure you fill it in yourself first. Don't just wait to see my answers and copy them down. Make sure you watch the Algebra for Dummies video because they've got extra little hints and descriptions in there. That you could also add to your notes. So if you want to, you can kind of check your answers now. I'll just zoom out a bit. And you can check your answers. You probably got it right. Assume you got it right. But if you want to, you can check an equation. Here's the example of the equation, equal sign. But also make sure there's terms. There must be terms either side. This is still a term. It's just a constant term. The variables here are x. And the coefficient of the x squared term is 2. The coefficient of the x term is 4. Exponent, here's an example because 2 is the exponent. Feel free to circle it if you want. 3 is the base. You might want to make a note. 3 is the base. 2 is the exponent in this example. 3 terms are down here. Because see, 3 terms. Terms must be separated by addition and subtraction signs. It could just be a separate one. Like you could just have 3xy. That's still a term. Doesn't have to have other things after it. And so on. Variable. Lots of examples of variables, but specifically I was thinking of, like, for example, A, then B, then C. They're examples of variables. A constant is a term that contains no variable. So just 5. It's not a coefficient because it's not multiplied by a variable. So that's a constant. An expression is a collection of terms separated by pluses or minuses, or could just be a single term. That's fine. 2x squared plus 4x. That's an example of an expression. There's no equal sign or anything like that.
Operations, what do we mean by that? Operations, we just mean like these things: addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, square roots, that kind of thing. And term, and some examples of terms. Oh, there's lots of examples of terms, but I think I did it here. 3 terms and terms. I was kind of just overdoing it really there. Okay, cool. So hopefully you've checked that and you're happy with it and you actually did watch the Algebra for Dummies video. And then that's the end of this video. Thank you very much for watching, and definitely feel free to replay any of this if you want, and have some little questions prepared. There's lots of space on your pages where you can write extra thoughts, questions. You can either email me, or because I'm not here right now, or you could wait till I come to class. It's fine. Okay, cool. Thank you very much, and that's the end of this video.